If you notice this picture, I don't know if you've ever lived in a religious area or passed through before Passover. People go very crazy cleaning for Pesach. They want to throw up everything, so throw out everything. There are these pop-up trucks. You see the U-Haul trucks that come to get rid of essentially extra names of God. This custom comes from in Deuteronomy. It says, "You shall obliterate their names from that place. You shall not do this to the Lord your God." So that differentiates the sanctity of God or Hashem versus the things you're supposed to destroy. Jewish law prohibits the destruction of any piece of writing which contains the printed name of God. A piece of paper or parchment that fits within these parameters must be ritually buried or stored in a geniza to honor and respect the holiness of its writings on its surface. So I first became aware and kind of obsessed with this garbage of God, as I colloquially like to call it, please don't take offense, when I was studying in seminary. I was getting my master's at Hunter, and I was also at a Jewish women's learning institution called Drisha. And I noticed all these piles and piles of papers with the name of God written, and I just became fascinated with this question. How do you get rid of something holy? And the first project I did on this is that I created a prayer book out of these disposed of remnants. There's a teaching in Judaism that the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and I had the women in the seminary pray with these discarded pages, and it was a cacophonous mess, but there was something holy in what was supposed to be disposed of. So that's where I found the first little spark of potentially what could be holy in this sort of God trash that we tried to throw away. There's actually an industry that has popped up around the disposal methods. I've become a little bit obsessed. For a short while, you could order these green cardboard boxes that you could send in, kind of like a prepaid priority mailbox. It would come to your house, and you just put in all this God trash, and it would be sent who knows where. And I started becoming really interested in where's the where. Where's it sent to? Where's it buried? Where's it disposed of? And as in Judaism, there's lots of opinions about everything on any topic. You could probably find 30 opinions. But the prescribed, when Seamus was first written about in Deuteronomy and Torah, it does not take into account our age of mass media, photocopy machines, and printers, where God's name can be multiplied thousands of fold in a matter of seconds, turning essentially what is holy to something profane or commodified in a matter of seconds. And actually, it has become a potentially profitable industry, as you see with these boxes, and it's sort of clouded in secrecy. So I became kind of this obsessive compulsive detective, wanting to see where all the geniza was buried. And of course, there's lots of halakha or Jewish law about how to do it properly, and a lot of people do bury it properly. The most holy of objects are supposed to go in clay vessels, because that just, you can't prevent the destruction of the name forever, but you can just delay the process. And there's lots of technical specifications. If anyone's interested in the Jewish law of Seamus disposal, I can get into that later, but as this is an arts conference, I won't bore you too much with technical Jewish law. But so I was very happy for a while. I was following around rabbis who were doing this properly, but it was at a small scale. And then I heard whispers about this sort of scandal or this improper burial in Lakewood. I was living in Manhattan at the time. Lakewood's in southern Jersey. So I started going to Lakewood and I sniffed around. And unfortunately, I found this, which is not how you properly dispose of the name of God. This was a particularly bad incident where the local rebbeim and the Department of Environmental Protection got into a fight. Actually another interesting of where modern day values of environmental protection and ancient values of how to bury Jewish objects clash, but in that court case it created this dump site of these holy objects in the woods. So I don't know if I can give you a good sense of the scale, but it was football fields. Football fields. I actually have a video which I will show. So for those of you just walking in to get situated, this is sort of a graveyard full of holy remnants of holy objects that were supposedly be properly buried, but were just dumped in the woods. And I discovered them, not by accident, intentionally. But it is sad because all these had, some of these, as I walked through this site in Lakewood, sort of the visceral reaction of sadness of, as a somewhat observant Jew, of what do I do? So anything that was actually parchment, which is anything written by hand, which has a higher level of, there's different levels of how one must properly dispose of, and the highest level is a Torah scroll, but just under that is anything else written in the same manner, like a mezuzah or a Megillah. There are other holy scrolls. So any mezuzah or any mezuzah scroll or Megillah scroll which I found, I gathered and took with me because I could not leave it there. It wasn't mine to take, but I could not leave it. So this started, I straddled two worlds in my artistic practice as an observant Jewish person and an artist, and it kind of leaves me in this liminal no man's land where I'm calling rabbis with strange questions about what do I do with these putrefied mush balls of parchment I find, because they're in between life and death. They should be buried, but they're not, and who am I to save them? So this actually got me into the process of learning about traditional parchment making. I worked with a sofer in upstate New York, in Linda Muskin, who taught me how to make parchment. And I did this in order to save these mezuzah scrolls that I found, which I will show you. I will flip back and forth. So these were little balls of putrefied mush, and I built basically mini frames. This is my first big parchment that I stretched, but I built basically the same structure, or little frames for these mezuzah scrolls. I had to soak them and re-stretch them, and I sort of created these objects that are sort of in this like weird liminal space between life and death, because they really should be in the ground, but because I took them and preserved them, I was given the heter, or rabbinic permission, to keep them for the holy purpose of art, creativity. Yes, as all of you should appreciate, we're here at the Jewish Arts Conference. But personally, I was very deeply disturbed by this whole experience. So I really needed to figure out, how does one properly dispose of the name of God, the name of Hashem? And I thought it had to be an organic process. As a religious Jew, this hit me so hard. So I thought it had to be organic. I had consulted with lots of rabbis. There's a halakha, or Jewish law, about not permanently changing your body. That's where the prohibition against tattooing comes from. So I was trying to figure out how to get around. I knew it had to be an organic process, close to me, but I was trying to get around not permanently altering my body and not actually actively like erasing the name of God, which you're not allowed to do. So I got rabbinic permission for a process of tattooing called bloodline. What it does is that it's getting tattooed with water instead of ink. There's no permanent change, and it just raises blood to the surface of your skin. And I got the name Elohim, or God, across my back. And the purpose of this project was a tikkun, or a repair, for what I had observed in this Geniza dump site, Lakewood. It actually was a little bit visceral, but the purpose of this project was to document, really the aim was to document the place where Elohim, or the name of God, and my skin sort of merged into one. So I would photograph my back every day, and trying to find that one spot where my flesh and the name of God sort of merge into one. So I did that, and ironically it took 40 days, which is a very special number in Judaism. And so I figured, where do I go from here? I'm sort of done. I'm a little bit jaded with the how Geniza is disposed of in the States, and that's not to say there's a couple bad apples, but most people are doing a good job. But I wanted to explore how they do it in a different culture, so I got generous funding from Asylum. Thank you, Rebecca. And I was living in Israel for a bunch of years. I was able to create like a web archive of all the Geniza repository sites in Israel. The goal was Israel. I ended up capping it at Jerusalem because it took, it's actually a very mechanized system with a nonprofit organization, but the Haredi, which means this particular group is very insular, which means they didn't want to talk to me because I wasn't a member of their group, or maybe I was a woman, but I do a lot of this research on my own, so it took a very long time. So I created this web archive called God Garbage, an archive of Jerusalem sacred trash. I found all the disposal sites in Jerusalem. It's actually a useful tool. I've been told that people use this to find the disposal boxes because there was no list of them before. So I'm glad I created some use for them. And what's interesting in Israel is that they sort of have like they have these boxes that are placed all around the city where you place your geniza. It's not like here where you go to a synagogue and that's where you, or a yeshiva, you need a specialty place. Like this is on any street corner. And it is supposedly buried in a site near Modi'in. To high halachic standards. But again, I tried to go there and I tailed some people and I found it. I was not allowed to film by threat of arrest. So anyway. But so I finished this project and felt very good and was like, oh, this is a system that worked. But as I was doing research for this presentation, I found this article in an Israeli English media paper that basically said that in Israel, this is from February of this year, that it was plagued with the same problem as happened here in America. So outrage as Seamus Geniza is tossed with the trash. So this just leaves me wondering of really how one does properly dispose of the name of God. Like, is the only option to get it tattooed on your flesh? I mean, it can't be, but we are obviously having a big problem with how to properly dispose of these holy objects, especially in this age of mass media and Xerox machines. Because some people consider that these do need to be buried in a special way, and some people don't. But so I'm leaving you on this sort of unpleasant but real note, because this is where I am. And there is no really clean way to wrap it up. The last picture is of just how my husband and I are storing it in our house. It's an art object right now. So it's sort of a living, breathing sculpture in our house. But if people want to, as people came for Pesach and want to get rid of this obviously won't work for everybody. I will open it up to questions.